President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris started the day at Statuary Hall with speeches marking the January 6th attacks on the U.S. Capitol.
First time in our history, a president had not just lost an election, he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. A former president who lies about this election and the mob that attacked this Capitol could not be further away from the core American values.
After he spoke, the president took questions from the press where he was asked about the divisive tone of his speech.
Does calling him out divide more than it heals?
Look, the way you have to heal, you have to recognize the extent of the wound. You can't pretend. You got to face it. That's what great nations do. They face the truth, deal with it, and move on.
And the vice president comparing what happened 1 year ago to some of the worst tragedies in American history.
Certain dates echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault. Dates that occupy not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941, September 11th, 2001, and January 6th, 2021.
Jesse Waters, let me give you first crack at some reaction today on the 5.
Well, that was amateur hour with Kamala. What a goofball. But January 6th sucked, Dana. It sucked. Everybody knows it sucks. We watched it. I hated seeing what I saw. It hurt the brand, and it gave the left an excuse to crack down on innocent Trump supporters. But here is an objective analysis on what had culminated. The populist wing erupted that day. The Trump wing, the populist wing of the Republican Party, had felt disrespected for many, many years. They had propelled Trump to victory in 2016, and immediately every powerful interest in this country launched a scorched earth campaign against that guy. They went to war with him. Illegal leaking of his tax returns, racial hoaxes, rape hoaxes, illegal targeting, spying, fabricating evidence, planning evidence, vicious stuff. They tried everything. Then COVID hit, and they sued to change the election laws and then blasted out millions of ballots like no one's ever seen. Then all of a sudden, Zuckerberg drops $500 million with a B to pay for these private election activists to layer on top of the state election officials, unprecedented. Then big tech spikes the laptop from hell, the Republicans' October surprise. And then it takes nearly a week to count the votes after the election. So Republicans genuinely felt cheated. They felt robbed. They couldn't prove it in court, but they felt after 4 years of those shenanigans that something was off. It was a culmination of a lot of just nasty skullduggery. Here are the facts, though, Dana. Reuters reports FBI has found no evidence that the January 6th attack was the result of an organized plot to overturn the presidential election. No evidence that Trump or his team were involved in organizing the violence. No seditious conspiracy, no grand scheme. And the vast majority of the people charged were charged with trespassing, which, by the way, isn't even a crime in Manhattan anymore. New York Times reported there was an FBI informant, at least one, inside the mob. And mysteriously, we still don't have an answer as to why the Capitol was left so unprotected that day. The feds are fighting us in court, withholding the video evidence of that day. Now, Professor Waters, history major, would like to share a few things with you guys, because the Democrats are acting like, oh, they've never had a soft spot for political violence. In 1954, Puerto Rican nationals, they shot up the House chamber. They injured 5 members of Congress. Jimmy Carter commuted their sentence. In 1983, American communists bombed the Senate. They were targeting Republicans, blew up the Senate wing on the 2nd floor. Who commuted their sentence? Oh, wait, that was President Bill Clinton. William Ayers, Weather Underground, bombed the Pentagon, his team. Barack Obama, best buds. And if I I mean, it hasn't been that long, but I think we all remember that it was the Harris-Biden ticket that bailed out the rioters who set the whole country on fire, causing 30 deaths. So just want to make sure everybody knows that little history before they start pointing fingers.
There was this other piece that I want to play for you some sound, Greg, that the president's team released an early excerpt of the speech. This was that excerpt, but here is the president saying it out loud.
At this moment, we must decide, what kind of nation are we going to be? Are we going to be a nation that accepts political violence as a norm? Are we going to be a nation where we allow partisan election officials to overturn the legally expressed will of the people? Are we going to be a nation that lives not by the light of the truth, but in the shadow of lies? We cannot allow ourselves to be that kind of nation. The way forward is to recognize the truth and to live by it.
Greg, your thoughts on that?
Well, this was a guy that was supposed to unite the country, and we've pretty much seen what he's turned out to be. He basically, what he did was he scolded millions of Americans for what he believes something very bad that they did. He's presuming their guilt. He's assuming they're guilty. That's not what a president should do. He just reversed the presumption of innocence, concluding that all of those people there were guilty. And he's doing it from the highest office in the land. This is exactly what he did with the Border Patrol agent. This is exactly what he did with Kyle Rittenhouse. There isn't a citizen in America that he wouldn't bash if it suited him politically without the actual facts, without the truth. He keeps talking about the truth, but in every one of those instances, there are lies. There are lies. What America needs right now is a triple vaccine dose of fair and balance, because we're being force-fed brainwash from a media in an orgy of self-congratulation, in a deliberate and coordinated scam to basically target their political enemies, as Jesse pointed out. And as usual, the Democrats are working in tandem with the media, the same way they did with the Hunter Biden laptop cover-up, the same way they did it with Russian collusion, the same way they did it with the shadow campaign that Time Magazine boasted about that saved the 2020 election. They bragged about that. How can you not see this coordinated effort when you see everybody involved, including the cast of Hamilton, for God's sake? The fact is, why are we, probably the majority of Americans, letting anyone dictate a phony narrative under the guise of an anniversary, unless it's about the anniversary of Ashley Babbitt's murder? Because that's more valuable than anything we listen to today. And it's easy to commemorate one day, right? One day. Good luck commemorating the riots after George Floyd, or the riots after Jacob Blake, or the riots after Trump was elected in 2016. You'd have to commemorate every single day. You would run out of damn candles if you commemorated that stuff. But this is easy. This is easy. It's one day. They're trying to turn it into Pearl Harbor. They're trying to turn it into 9/11. But you can't commemorate their crimes, because then you'll realize how little the media and the Democrats cared about your actual suffering during those riots. So they do this to place a target on the backs of their political enemies, the rubes. And they're doing it as a coordinated effort, and they want this thing to be permanent. Every year we're going to have to do that. I say no, F you.
I
didn't say the actual word.
No, you didn't.
I said F stands for forget.
There's no
Dana.
bleeping.
I said forget.
Hashtag never forget.
By the way, congratulations, Dana, on the Love Boat reboot.
I'm so excited.
You're going to make a great Julie.
I mean, that was a deep tease. That was going to be my one more thing.
Yes.
But stay tuned for that, everybody. You're going to love it. One of the things, Harold, that the Democrats did today, and Vice President Harris, because she's in charge of the voting rights legislation that they're trying to get passed through the Congress, she made a pitch for why that legislation should be passed. Let's listen to her here.
Let's be clear. We must pass the voting rights bills that are now before the Senate.
Right now, in state after state, new laws are being written, not to protect the vote, but to deny it. Not only to suppress the vote, but to subvert it. Not to strengthen or protect our democracy.
Harold, they're in a similar position that they were in with Build Back Better, which is that they have two senators who are, at least two that we know of, that are not interested in busting the filibuster in order to try to get this done. Are they going to basically set themselves up for failure once again?
I don't know. I hope that the John Lewis Act is what is eventually brought to the floor of the House and the Senate. But let me say just a few words. I watched last year on this day, and I served in that Capitol. Some of those people on that floor are my friends, still are my friends. I don't distinguish my friends Democrat or Republican. I watched as I saw those people walking through the Capitol, those Americans who I think were in every which way, I don't know whom they might be. Greg, you're right. We should not cast blame or cast guilt until they have a chance to defend themselves. But I've never seen a scene like that. I know the Capitol. I've taken children and young people and older people on tours in the mornings and the nights and the evenings there. So it touched me in a different kind of way. I read the things in the paper by Karl Rove, saying, who I don't agree with on a lot of political or substantive issues, but one thing I do agree with him on is I love my country. You talked about, Jesse, I thought rightly, some of the things that you disagree with that some presidents have done in terms of commuting sentences. But I would remind all of us that in the Adams-Jefferson race, that race was decided on the House floor. Adams won. Imagine had we had an effort to do what happened on January 6th, or even that Jackson-Adams race where Jackson lost to Adams. And as Dana knows, President Bush, George W. Bush, when he beat Al Gore, I'll never forget being on that floor and watching on that floor and watching Al Gore say that I lost the race and asking Congresswoman Waters to not challenge it. What happened that day, I hope we can at some point forget about it, but we shouldn't wash it over. And I don't mean, I think we separate some of the things that you guys have raised, but there was an effort to subvert the two most important things, one of the two most important things Congress does, which is either declare war and confer an election on a new president, which is the way we peacefully transfer power. So I hope one day we can forget this day, but I don't think we've gotten to that point yet.
Certainly not. And there were a lot of people that were injured, and you could watch the coverage with your own eyes. We covered it here, and we've seen a lot of the retrospectives. Dagan, I'll give you the last word today on the A block.
I don't know if Biden and company are this smart, but this seemed to be, these speeches by Kamala Harris and Biden seem to be strategic. That right now the only chance that they have of retaining the White House is if Donald Trump runs again. Biden didn't win in 2020. It was Trump that lost for him. So this seemed like an effort to goad Trump into running again and to poke the bear, so to speak, because that's their best shot at winning. This is the only issue that the Democrats have that they can run on, and that is January 6th. So if Donald Trump tries to run again, this is the one thing that they will talk about over and over again. That if you have a Ron DeSantis running as the nominee with a Tim Scott as his running mate, that pair is going to win 40 states. And who did Joe Biden convince today? Anybody who saw this as a horrible riot and not an insurrection and no threat to democracy, they're not going to listen to him and they're not going to believe him. But I would love to see Joe Biden be this forceful and give at least some small damn for the people who are truly suffering under this man's presidency because of his leadership, or rather lack thereof. Whether it's given a damn about the 13 service members who were killed because of his shoddy withdrawal from Afghanistan, or all the murder victims and their families in Democrat-run states from coast to coast, because, again, criminal justice is about the criminals and not the victims. Fentanyl, tens of thousands dead because fentanyl's pouring over the wide-open border. Because of Joe Biden. So how about showing a little bit of empathy and outrage for all those people hurt because of you, Pawpaw President?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.